You have a static game plan. A shame, really. You could be getting so much more if you were to just look at your opponent and be able to adapt to what they do. That's what I, Team Eminence Small Child Lord, am here to teach you. I'll explain what I'm talking about, how to implement it, and how to change if it turns out you're wrong. Well, what is adaptation? Adaptation is the process in which you notice parts of your opponent's play and use that to your advantage. This can include habits, what mix-ups they use, etc. Taking advantage of these things is crucial to all parts of the game since it's a two-player game and going off of your own plan without change is simply not going to work against every player. This is why at times someone may lose to you and then completely destroy you in the next game. This is the product of proper adaptation, and ideally you'll be able to do this not only across games but within them as well. Well then, how do you adapt? The first thing you need to understand is that all people have a pattern of some kind even if they don't know it. Whether it be a game plan, a habit, or even a mix-up. You need to get as much information as you can. There is an issue though, that being that you won't be able to get everything. Trying to get everything is pointless and will really just leave you going into patterns that might work but probably won't. This is why you must learn to properly categorize and prioritize what you need to adapt to. There are three primary things to adapt to: the matchup, the macro, and the micro. The matchup is what you and your opponent are forced to do simply based on what characters you two have chosen. This is very important as it narrows down the possibilities of effective game plans significantly. The macro is the game plan your opponent chooses from those possibilities. The game plan is incredibly important since if you know what your opponent wants to do in a general sense, then all you will have to do from there is figure out the means in which they achieve that end. The micro is what those means are. The micro is essentially the plan within the plan. It includes just about every smaller piece of information you can grab. Past this point, it gets incredibly muddled. Knowing what exactly you should be keeping track of is difficult because you only have so much space in your mental stack. Being able to properly identify what is useful information and what is meaningless jargon is one of the biggest steps to leveling up. If you think too broadly, such as thinking only about vague aspects of a game plan, then you won't be able to see the little things that make that game plan work, and as a result, you will get smothered very quickly. On the contrary, if you only think about specific interactions and how your opponent will act in them, then you will miss what they're trying to do and you will fall for traps much more easily. Once you find that balance, you must be able to quickly scrub away and change what information you put in the categories that you've set up. However, finding the balance is incredibly difficult and what one categorizes can always be improved. So then, how do you figure out what to adapt to? Well, considering the fact that I'm not perfect, if I were to give anything other than general guidance, there would be a high chance I would set you up for failure. Anything past what I tell you here, you'll just have to figure out on your own. Even some of the things that I say here will need to be taken with caution, as this is from my own personal experience. The way I think about it, you must have a hierarchy of thoughts. At the very top, you have the most important and often broadest things to keep track of. As you go down the tree, you can put less important and more specific things that you'll pick up on after everything above has already been discovered about your opponent. The exact way you put this hierarchy isn't important as long as it's efficient. What is important is what you prioritize. This is something you'll have to figure out on your own, since what you need to know is needlessly complex and sometimes dependent on random factors like the matchup. Though as you figure it out, you'll continually get better at knowing what exactly to adapt to, and as a result become significantly better as a player. This is simply the model I was able to come up with, and it likely has flaws that others can exploit if they're savvy enough to get around it, which is precisely the reason you want to learn how to figure out why your thought process works and doesn't, and then be able to change it in such a way that you get rid of what doesn't work and keep what does. Though at its core, adaptation is about proper thought management. Well, what about conditioning? Conditioning throws a massive wrench into your adaptation by giving you information and then deliberately changing to turn that adaptation against you. You could theoretically ask whether your opponent is conditioning you within your hierarchy, but it's a very hard thing to track since what you may see as conditioning could simply be a mix-up, pressure, or any other unrelated thing. Sifting through what your opponent's exact intentions could be for doing something is incredibly taxing for the rewards you get out of it, and as such is normally not worth doing. Rather, you want to look at how the interaction fits within their plan in a more broad sense. This is less taxing and gives you more information about your opponent. Piecing together parts of someone's plan is infinitely more efficient than focusing on the specific meaning of a single interaction. That's not to say that looking at individual interactions isn't important, rather that they should be looked at after more important things as to not overload yourself with information that may not even be correct. That way, you have a safety net, since even if you're wrong, you at least have a plan to fall back on when your analysis eventually fails you. Being efficient is much better than being specific. And I'm done! Adaptation is really difficult and requires a lot more thought than just about everything else. Though as long as you work at it, it will eventually become more easy and effective. Think efficiently, prioritize what you must do, and recognize when you should change. This has been Adaptation by Team Eminence Small Child Lord. Please subscribe for more Smash related content.